Welcome to the Damascus Road podcast. On the road to Damascus, Paul had a radical encounter with Jesus and his life was changed forever. That is what we hope and pray for here. Now, on to this week's episode.
So this may be surprising to you since I'm standing up here preaching this morning, but I used to suffer from severe glossophobia. What is glossophobia, you may ask? It is just a fancy word for the fear of public speaking. So, who here does not like to talk in front of other people? I'm proud of you guys for raising your hand in front of other people to tell me that you don't like to talk in front of other people. Research studies consistently put about 75% of the population as having a fear of public speaking, so you're in good company if you don't like to do that. And interestingly, glossophobia is often cited higher for people than their fear of death. Would you like to give a speech? I'd rather die, is apparently the honest response for very many people. Now, if you suffer from glossophobia, I get your soul-crushing anxiety. Class presentations, the worst. But the epitome of my torture was my speech and debate class in 8th grade. I don't know what circumstances resulted in me being in speech and debate, because I don't like arguing, and I definitely did not like talking in front of other people, so this is kind of a lose-lose class for me. And I remember the heart-rending horror of sitting at my desk, like shaking, my teeth chattering, sweating bullets, just waiting for my name to be called to have to go talk in front of people. I wasn't funny, I wasn't charming. At that point, my voice didn't get louder than a mouse. It was a terrible experience, and I just made a fool of myself in front of people. It was the worst class of the worst year, and I was never going to do anything like that again. I told myself I'd rather die. So I avoided all public speaking for my freshman and sophomore year of high school, but then I got roped into academic decathlon. Okay, for you non-nerds out there, academic decathlon is the elite championship sport for brains. It is the only thing close to a sport that I would ever participate in. You basically do a bunch of studying and then take a bunch of tests. And that might sound awful to you, but is it really that different from the horribleness of running laps and working out and sweating that people do for normal sports? No. Some people like that kind of sport. I liked academic decathlon. So there are 10 different events, hence decathlon. There are 7 different exams on subjects like math, science, economics, literature. You had to do a 50-minute essay, a job interview, and then the most dreaded event of all, the speech. You had to give a 4-minute prepared speech in front of people, and then a 2-minute impromptu speech based on a randomly drawn topic from a bucket. It was awful. It made me so stressed out. All the tests, I was like, this is a breeze, I can do this. But I would have nightmares about having to give my speech in front of people. My heart would beat fast, I would tremble and shake, and I would think, am I gonna have a heart attack? My heart is too troubled to do this thing. Now, I don't know about you guys, but what makes your heart troubled? Maybe it's giving speeches in front of people. Maybe it's other things. What gives you that uncomfortable, scared, anxious feeling in your body that makes your heart rate speed up, that makes you sweat, that makes you shake? I'm sure that we have all experienced this troubled feeling before. Maybe for you, it is for something as silly as me, like public speaking. But life is full of troubles. And there is no end to things that can set our hearts racing. Maybe for you, it's social anxiety and having to interact with people that you don't know, or when you have to put yourself into uncomfortable social situations. Maybe for you, it's finances that trouble your heart, that make you feel anxious and uncertain and a little sick to your stomach. Maybe for you, it's when you have conflict with people in your life. When a friend hurts your feeling, when a spouse lets you down, when you know you have to have this really hard conversation that none of you really wants. Maybe for you, it's the state of the world that produces anxiety for you. The chaos of our country, the direction of our politics, anxieties about the cost of gas or food or about war. Life is full of troubles. And that's what causes our troubled hearts, right? I don't know about you guys, but I hate that feeling of an anxious, troubled heart. In his last conversation with the disciples before he died, Jesus started speaking with the words, "Do not let your heart be troubled." And I want that to be true in my life. I don't want to live with a troubled, anxious, despairing, grieved, inadequate, failing, ungrateful, guilty heart. I want to live with an untroubled heart, full of deep love and peace and joy and the fruit of the Spirit. And if Jesus says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled" in the midst of a troubling world, he must mean that there is a way to live with an untroubled heart in our troubled world. Question is, how? This is the question that we are going to be exploring all summer. How do I have an untroubled heart in a troubled world? Now, pastor and author John Ortberg shares about a time when his life was really, really troubling. He was going through some hard work issues and navigating some really deep wounds with his children. And his friend Dallas Willard asked him how he was doing. And so John Ortberg replied, "Well, under the circumstances, I'm doing okay." And Dallas Willard responded, "What are you doing under there?" Which is a funny way of saying, why are you living under your circumstances? John Ortberg says, we are not meant to live under our circumstances, where the state of our heart is primarily a reflection of what is going on around us. We are meant to live under the power, strength, and love of God. Now, this is pretty counterintuitive. Obviously, my circumstances affect me and affect how my heart is feeling. The anxiety and trouble in my heart and the stressor that is creating that seem indelibly linked in my mind. Like, of course, one flows from the others. Saying don't be troubled in troubled circumstances seems as ridiculous as telling someone, don't let gravity keep you down. Well, I kind of don't have a choice. Like, that's how the world works. Gravity is constantly pulling me down, whether I want it to or not. Feeling anxious and troubled feels similar. Do not let your heart be troubled. Great advice. Wish I could do that. But being anxious and troubled is just what happens when anxiety-inducing things happen. But this is what Jesus tells us. He says, do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me. By commanding this, Jesus is drawing a distinction between the state of our heart and the state of the world. They are not inextricably linked together. And though we will rarely have control over our circumstances and our world, we do have control over our hearts. Theologian Hans Walter Wolf did a deep dive into the biblical concept of heart. It is used over 850 times in the Old Testament alone, so it's a popular word. And it is the single word that is most important in describing a human being in the Bible. In the Bible, heart is the executive control center of a human being. It is like the will, the decision maker. In the biblical imagine, you direct your life from your heart, not your brain. In our modern concept, your brain does all that. But in the Bible, it's your heart that does that. Proverbs 4:23 says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. When Jesus says, do not let your hearts be troubled, he is saying, do not let the part of you that controls who you choose to be and how you choose to act be controlled by external circumstances. The state of our heart does not have to be tied to the state of our world. Ortberg suggests this small daily reflection as we begin this journey of an untroubled heart. This is just a really simple reflective tool to kind of help us tune into the fact that our heart and our world can be in different places. So once a day, ask yourself, how troubled has this day been on a scale of 1 to 10? And you rate it. And you say, well, today my car didn't start, so maybe 6. That was a little stressful. But then I ask, how peaceful has my heart been on a scale of 1 to 10? And I try and judge how troubled has my heart been. Those numbers might be the same for you. They might be different for you. But then you are to ask yourself, what might I learn from this? So this is not a judgment question. This isn't about berating yourself because those numbers should be a certain thing. This is just helping you tune into your heart and the world and helping you understand that these two things are separate from each other and do not necessarily have to be the same. I remember driving with my friend Preeti in her car when I was in my early 20s. And I hadn't been driven by very many people who weren't my family at that point, or I was the one driving because I had a car. And we were in the parking lot of a grocery store. And she was driving like so mildly and unconcernedly, stopping. She was just like letting people go in front of her, totally relaxed. And maybe this is your experience with driving, but at that time of my life, it was not my experience. The parking lot was stressful. You were on the hunt. Like, this was the wild savannah. You had to find a spot as soon as possible and steal it before anyone else did. And if you weren't aggressive, you would probably never park, and you would never get to go into the store, and you would never get that gallon of milk that you desperately need. And you should probably say some mean comments about other people's lousy driving while you're circling the parking lot. I hadn't realized, driving in a parking lot doesn't have to make me feel like this. I had assumed that the circumstances, driving in a parking lot, dictated my response and the anxious stress feeling that I had in parking lots. But watching my friend drive so mildly and peacefully in the exact same situation made me realize that my stress and my circumstances are different from each other, and I don't have to find parking lots stressful. Some people were clearly capable of driving in them without feeling stressed. Maybe that could be my reality too. Now, even if we begin to recognize that our circumstances and our hearts are not the same, and they are not totally dependent on one another, having an untroubled heart is still like almost impossible to do. Let's explore a little bit more the scene in which Jesus is telling his disciples to have an untroubled heart, see if we can gain some insight and clues on how to do this. Do not let your hearts be troubled begins what is commonly referred to as the upper room discourse that Ryan mentioned. It is John chapters 14, 15, 16, and 17, and it takes place during the Last Supper when Jesus is eating the Passover meal with his disciples in an upper room, hence the upper room discourse. We would call it like the second story now, but they called it the upper room. This is the last conversation, the last teaching encouragement that Jesus gives to his friends before his death. So we should pay attention. What is happening right before the upper room discourse begins? Here's a summary of John chapter 13, if you flip back one chapter. First, Jesus washes his disciples' feet. Next, he predicts that one of his disciples will betray him. And then last, he tells Peter that Peter will deny him 3 times before the rooster crows the next morning. So this is literally the verses right before, do not let your hearts be troubled. Simon Peter asked, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus replied, you can't go with me now, but you will follow me later. But why can't I come now, Lord? He asked. I'm ready to die for you. Jesus answered, die for me? I tell you the truth, Peter. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but this does not seem like a natural follow-up to, you will betray me. Don't let your heart be troubled. Like, Jesus, this is very troubling information. The disciples are troubled right here, right now, because Jesus has just said some very troubling things. He's told them that one of them will betray him. The betrayer has gotten up and left the building at this point. Peter has been told that he will deny his master and Messiah 3 times this very night. The disciples are very concerned. They are very troubled. They are confused. They are insecure. They're feeling inadequate. And I don't blame them. This is a very troubling situation. But Jesus' next line is, do not let your hearts be troubled. How is Jesus feeling about this situation of betrayal and abandonment that is about to happen? Is he feeling happy-go-lucky about it? Like, no trouble, you guys. Just going to betray me and go die on a cross? No big deal. No, Jesus is not a robot. Jesus is actually also very troubled. This is the same scene right before he says, do not let your hearts be troubled. Now Jesus was deeply troubled, and he exclaimed, I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me. I think it is easy for me to hear the command, do not let your hearts be troubled, and think that Jesus is saying, never feel anxious. Never get concerned. Never feel scared or distressed or hurt. But Jesus himself feels troubled. So that cannot be the meaning of his command. Instead, in the Greek, this command is in the ongoing present tense. So in English, this is like the distinction between don't trip and don't keep on tripping. In the ongoing present tense, it is totally expected that you probably have tripped once in order for me to say, don't keep on tripping. That's what this tense is when Jesus is saying, do not keep on letting your hearts be troubled. With this command, Jesus is expecting that your heart will be troubled. We will have upsetting circumstances in life. We will come up against things that are uncomfortable and distressing, that make us feel anxious or feel like we want to throw up. That is normal. Jesus felt that way. Jesus felt troubled. But he is telling us, don't let it go on without addressing it. Don't let your heart continue to be troubled. Don't keep on being troubled. Our hearts will be troubled, but we don't have to keep on being troubled. So the big question is, how do we do this? If it were just as simple as like saying, okay, heart, don't be troubled, no one here would struggle with anxiety or feeling upset ever. But that doesn't work that way. Have any of you guys ever tried that? Just be like, yeah. So when your friend comes up and they're like, just don't be anxious. You're like, if I could do that, I would. I'm sorry. But there's a better way. Jesus has his troubled heart, and he is able to deal with it. So what does he do? First, Jesus goes to God with it. In his distress, Jesus prays fervently over and over in the Garden of Gethsemane. There he pours out his heart to God, and he asks God what he wants. He tells God his solution of what would alleviate his troubled heart, that the cup of suffering be taken away from him. And I don't know about you guys, but that's something that I ask for when I'm troubled. Please just make this thing go away, God. Jesus prays that as well to God. But he also surrenders his desires for his circumstances to change to God's will. Instead of living under his circumstances, he lives under God. One of the simplest solutions to a troubled heart often seems to be just remove the thing that is troubling me. This is what Jesus asks for to deal with his troubled heart, but he recognizes that God probably has a different plan that is better than simply removing what's troubling him. So first he goes to God. Second, Jesus goes to people. And the core of life is loving God and loving others. So we go to God and we go to people. We need both. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prays to God, but he also takes his 3 closest friends with him. Jesus took Peter and Zebedee's 2 sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. We need the companionship of other people, especially when our heart is troubled. We need the embodied presence of human beings. Jesus says, stay here with me. Now notice that Peter, James, and John's presence does not change Jesus' circumstances. The thing that is deeply troubling him will still happen. The presence of others will probably not change our circumstances or the thing that is troubling us, but that's not why people are helpful. Rather, the presence of people eases the burden of our heart, and they provide the comfort of you are not alone. So Jesus goes to God, he goes to people, and then third, he goes to action. Jesus is deeply troubled by the suffering before him. So how does he deal with his troubled heart? He steps into the suffering. Jesus was desperately troubled by the thought of the cross. And what did he do? He went to the cross, the very thing that was causing him distress. He faces the trouble head on. And I think this is the least intuitive way for me to deal with a troubled heart, because anxiety whispers that the way to deal with pain and unpleasantness of a troubled heart is to just make the trouble go away. If I remove the troubling circumstance or remove myself from the troubling circumstance, I won't feel troubled. Anxiety tells me I should build a cocoon. I should make my world soft and untroubled, and then I will feel untroubled. For instance, if social situations make you feel troubled and anxious, anxiety says, just don't put yourself in social situations. Don't go to small group. Don't go to the work outing. Don't go to the game night. Keep your world cocooned from anything that would make you feel anxious. But in his response to his troubled heart, Jesus shows us that a cocoon is not the answer. Action is. Moving into rather than away is the solution. The problem with padded walls is that they actually make you weaker. Rather than making you less troubled, they make you less resilient and more easily troubled. Even minor things become a big deal. Have any of you guys heard the story of the Princess and the Pea? Yes? Okay. So there's basically this princess, and she's trying to go to sleep. And they have to keep piling mattresses on top of the bed because there's a little pea in the bottom of the mattress, and she can feel it through 20 mattresses of fluff. We don't want to be like the Princess and the Pea, where the smallest, tiniest thing troubles our heart. This little pea under 20 mattresses kept her awake all night, made her unable to sleep, caused her immense suffering, and it was just a pea. When you try to deal with a troubled heart by cocooning and padding and adding another mattress and another mattress and another mattress, you actually weaken your ability to weather and endure hardship, and you become more sensitive to the thing that troubles you. One of my old friends from college really struggled with social anxiety, like a lot of people do. But while we were in school together, he did a really good job of pushing himself out of his comfort zone and forcing himself to hang out with others. Some of it was probably against his choice. He lived at the hangout house, the fort, and so whether he wanted to be around people or not, people just showed up like every night of the week for meetings, for dinner, for small group, to play Guitar Hero. And so he was forced to confront his social anxiety over and over and over again. And he actually developed really deep friendships with people. But when he moved away, he bought a house by himself. And then slowly, he stopped going to small group because that was uncomfortable. And then he stopped going to church because that was uncomfortable. And then he stopped going to work because that was uncomfortable. It was just easier to work remotely and not have to interact with any of his coworkers. It was years and years of small decision-making, of cocooning, of choosing over what was comfortable over what was troubling. But a decade of avoiding his social anxiety has not made my friend better able to handle people. The exact opposite has happened. He has cocooned himself so much from people that even the doorbell ringing gives him a panic attack because of the fear of having to talk to a stranger. We think that avoiding the troubling thing will ease our troubled hearts, but it's not true. It does the exact opposite. Cocooning ourselves and padding the walls and avoiding the anxiety-inducing situations just make our hearts more troubled in the long run. Dr. Reed Wilson explains it this way. It sounds crazy, but it's paradoxical. Your job, if you want to overcome anxiety and worry, will be to purposefully and voluntarily choose to seek out uncertainty and distress. It'll be hard because to move purposefully and to unknown territory under anxiety's control, you must willingly choose to feel clumsy, to feel awkward, to feel unsure, to feel afraid. You will know you are progressing in the new unfamiliar territory when you voluntarily and purposefully decide to scare yourself. And this is exactly what Jesus did with his troubled heart. He legitimately asked God to take away the troubling circumstances. That's not wrong. Ask God to take away the troubling circumstances. He legitimately sought the comfort of friends as he faced his suffering, saying, "Stay here with me." But even with doing those two very important things, Jesus made the choice to voluntarily step into the experience that was so distressing to him, the thing that he was most afraid of, and Jesus chose to go to the cross. This is what Jesus said about his death before it happened. He said, "No one can take my life from me. I sacrifice it voluntarily. For I have the authority to lay it down when I want to and also to take it up again, for this is what my Father has commanded." I sacrifice it voluntarily. Jesus actively chooses to lean into the situation that is troubling him. And because he chose to push into the experience that was so anxiety-inducing, so wretched, and so painful, rather than cocooning himself from discomfort, we get to experience life with God. What good is on the other side of your discomfort? What benefit to you or others awaits on the other side of your trouble if you push through it? I hated public speaking growing up, but I did not get over my discomfort with public speaking by avoiding it. I had to choose to voluntarily put myself in the awkward, uncomfortable, and anxiety-inducing experience of public speaking, not just once, but over and over and over again. And those experiences were awful. They were not fun. I wasn't like, yes, I know, I am pushing into my trouble, which is so good. So now this feels great. That's not how it works, you guys. Trouble does not feel great. Even though it was the right and good path forward, the cross did not feel great to Jesus. We cannot judge the success of facing our trouble by how good or bad we feel during the experience. These troubling experiences will not feel good in the moment, but they will slowly and steadily strengthen your heart in security and safety and resilience until 10 years later you look back and think, wow, my heart is not troubled. I never could have imagined preaching when I was a high schooler. I remember specifically saying that I would not be a pastor because public speaking was required, and that was far too uncomfortable for shy little me. But God had better plans for me than my own comfort, plans to prosper not only me, but others. The preaching I do has not just been really good for my own heart and my own relationship with God, but God has used my stepping in discomfort to not only grow me, but to grow others. God has had words that he has wanted to share with people, maybe even some of you, words of encouragement, words of grace, words of challenge, and he has used me as a vehicle to share those words with people they needed to hear. If God hadn't pushed me over and over into places where my heart was troubled, if I hadn't walked into the anxiety and trouble with God, the loss would not have only affected me. You might think to yourself, like, what does it matter if I get better at this? What does it matter if I don't face my fear of conflict or talking to people I don't know or of dealing with my finances? It's just me who has to deal with the fallout, right? No, our choices never affect just us. Think of Esther, who had to face her fear of going to the king to save her people. She had to walk into the distress and anxiety and trouble of a fraught situation because more than just her life was on the line. Jesus walked into the anxiety and fear and suffering of the cross because more than just his life was on the line. Your life was on the line. My life was on the line. Every other person's life in the world was on the line. What is God's good on the other side of your discomfort? What is the bigger benefit that God has in mind, not just for you, but to bless his people around you through you? John Ortberg teaches us the only way to an untroubled heart is through a troubled heart. Okay, you say, if I am going to lean into the discomfort and the trouble, I at least want to know that it's going to turn out well. When Jesus tells his disciples, do not be troubled, disciple Philip, he pipes up and he says, Lord, show us the Father and we will be satisfied. This is like saying, okay, Jesus, I won't be troubled if you just do this one thing for me. Just give me the certainty of seeing God, just that, and I promise I won't be troubled. My daughter, Catherine, often thinks that just one thing will satisfy her. Buy me a candy bar, Mama. Just one. All I want is one. That's all I want, Mama. But it never satisfies. The one candy bar becomes 2 candy bars, and then a dress, and then shoes, and then a puppy. And I think that she legitimately believes that that one candy bar will satisfy her when she asks for it, but I know better. Her desire is insatiable, and our desire is insatiable. There is no amount of reassurance or certainty or knowledge of the outcome that will satisfy us to face hard things. Seeking certainty in our anxiety and troubled heart is a different way of trying to cocoon ourselves. We are like, okay, I recognize that I cannot make the circumstances perfectly untroubled, so I want to shield my heart from feeling any hurt if I'm going to walk into the trouble. I want certainty, I want a guarantee, I want to be in control. I do not want to be vulnerable. But an untroubled heart is not an invulnerable heart. Jesus replies to Philip, "Have I been with you all this time, Philip, and yet you still don't know who I am? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. So why are you asking me to show him to you?" Jesus responds to our request for certainty with something radical: incarnation. God become flesh, God with us. God himself decided to come down as a little baby. And do you know what is really, really vulnerable? A newborn baby. A newborn baby is totally dependent, totally at the mercy of whoever is holding it. If the doctor wants to give you 5 shots, you will get 5 shots. If you are small and hungry, you can scream, but you can only hope that someone will hear you and feed you. The God of the universe thought that this incredible amount of vulnerability was the way to go. That even though we find that level of helplessness and need repulsive, God doesn't. Jesus teaches us that we must embrace our vulnerability. You have to go to the place of trouble, not because you are assured success, but because it is the going that grows you. Now, Peter, he's really good at moving into trouble. He's a brash fellow. And I think Peter gets a really bad rap for this last night because he will betray Jesus 3 times, saying he doesn't even know him. But I want to give kudos to Peter, because why is Peter even in the situation to deny Jesus? Because he shows up. He goes to the place of trouble, the very courtyard of the high priest where Jesus is on trial. John 18 tells us Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus into the courtyard. Following Jesus does not mean that we will be safe in the sense that we want to be safe. It does not mean that we will not get hurt. It does not mean that we won't fail, but it is the good place because it is the place that Jesus is, even if it means we are vulnerable and awkward and unsure. Jesus could have told Peter and the other disciples, "You guys, this is a troubled world. This is scary. I want you all to go home and hide out. Pull the blanket over your head, withdraw into your cocoon until I'm dead and resurrected. Then you guys can come out." But that's not what Jesus tells his disciples. He says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me." And Peter went into the place where he had enormous fear that he would die too. And Peter failed, and Jesus was with him. His failure or success is not what makes the going worthwhile. It is the going that grows you. Because this is not the last time that Peter goes into the courtyard of a high priest. The next time he goes, Peter boldly declares the name of Jesus to everyone there because he has been grown by facing his troubled heart earlier and failing. We will undoubtedly fail and make mistakes when we step out. We will say something awkward to someone. We will stumble through that conflict conversation. We will try a budget and we will fail to keep it. But that's okay. Perfection is not the goal. In the vulnerability of our failure, we learn to lean on Jesus and learn that we are okay even when we fail, because it's not about us having it all together. It's about God having it all together. The only way to an untroubled heart is through a troubled heart. If we want to have untroubled hearts like Jesus tells us is possible, we have to go through the experiences that trouble us. We cannot cocoon. We cannot pad the walls. We cannot avoid. We cannot demand certainty and security and success. We step out into the trouble knowing it's not about what you're in the middle of, but who is in the middle of you. So how do we deal with a troubled heart? We do what Jesus did. We go to God. The word for troubled is tarasso, which means like stirred up or agitated, like if you took a bottle of water and shook it. And part of what going to God does for us is it stills that troubling. There are studies that show that when 2 people are deeply connected, their hearts start to be in sync with each other, which I think is pretty cool. And this happens even when the 2 people aren't touching each other or aren't talking to each other. They're just in the same room. Their heartbeats will sync up. We can do this with God. We can stop and be still, and we can let our troubled heartbeats slow and sync up to God's patient, reassuring, steady heart. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me. When your heart is troubled, stop and be still. Let the stirred up waters of your heart settle and be in sync with God's heart. And it is okay to ask him to take the troubled circumstances away from you. Jesus asked that the cup of suffering be passed from him. But know that removing the trouble is very rarely God's path forward. What did Jesus do second? He went to people. Be with others. Again, this is not because people are able to fix your troubled situation or because people always say the right thing or have the best advice. Remember, the disciples did not change anything about Jesus' troubled circumstances. He still went to the cross, whether they were there or not. But we are comforted by the presence of people. After my husband Ryan and I miscarried our son over 4 years ago, there was nothing that anyone could say or do that would change our circumstances. My son was dead, and there was no going back to an untroubled reality. But my heart took so much comfort from the presence of others. Their shared grief over the loss of our baby made me feel like I wasn't alone. Their sitting and staying with me eased the bereftness of my heart. I couldn't change the troubled circumstances I was in. They couldn't change the troubled circumstances I was in. But I could lean on my friend's shoulder and I could cry. So we go to God, we go to people, and then we have to go to action. Now this is the hard one, but this is the one that starts this slow, small change in your heart. Rather than cocooning or avoiding or shielding, lean into what troubles you, knowing that it will hurt, that it will be uncomfortable, and you will probably fail, but that is okay. You have to go to the place of trouble, not because it will feel good or because you are sure you will succeed, but because it is the going that grows you. So, if talking to new people makes your mouth go dry, make yourself talk to one new person each Sunday. You will be awkward. You will run out of things to say. You will probably say something stupid. That's okay. Do it anyway, and keep doing it Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. If you struggle with social anxiety, make yourself go to a small group gathering every week. We have 2 of them. They're both on Thursday. It starts this week. And if you show up every week, you will have 14 weeks of practice. It's a lot of practice to work on that social anxiety. If your finances freak you out, set a date to make yourself look at your budget with a friend once a week, and then do it every week, over and over. If having that hard conversation with your spouse or your kid or a coworker is keeping you up at night, schedule the conversation. The conversation will suck, but then it will be over. And if it didn't go well, you just schedule another one, and you keep doing it. Keep leaning into the trouble because it is the going that grows you. And the only way to an untroubled heart is through a troubled heart. Now, God knows that our world is full of troubling things and that we will face troubling circumstances and really hard situations. He knows because he lived it. Jesus was troubled. But even in the midst of his most difficult anticipation of suffering and stress and dying on the cross, Jesus commands us, do not let your hearts be troubled. And then he showed us the first 3 steps in that journey. Go to God, go to people, go to action. May we awkwardly and vulnerably begin the brave, courageous journey towards an untroubled heart this summer and experience the deep joy and blessing of an untroubled heart. Let's pray. God, thank you for being a human being who is troubled and who understands fear and anxiety and distress. It can be easy if you're just thinking about you as God to say, well, of course you wouldn't be troubled because you're too big for that. But Jesus, you showed us that to be human is to become distressed, to be troubled, to have anxious thoughts and concerns about things. But we also know that there is a path forward in that, Lord. Thank you for demonstrating to us what it looks like to move into a troubled heart so that we can become untroubled on the other side, Lord. Please make us brave and courageous, Lord. Help us make the choices to voluntarily step into the situations that make us feel troubled, Lord. Please help us resist the desire and instinct to cocoon, to avoid, to choose what is comfortable over what is right. I just pray that we find our courage and our safety in you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for joining the Damascus Road podcast. Our mission is to follow Jesus together by being with God, loving everyone, transforming people, developing leaders, growing new ministries, and changing the world. You can find out more about us online at DamascusRoadTucson.com.